What do Vaush, Destiny, and Ben Shapiro share in common? They are all advocates for a globalized, liberal international order, one that has free trade, open immigration, and is policed by the US military and intelligence community in collaboration with various international organizations. An American global empire may sound pretty great to wealthy people who are entirely preoccupied with personal consumption. The reason behind the American Revolution was to liberate Americans from the tyranny of the British Empire. As many of you know, Puerto Rico became a colony of the United States after the Spanish-American War. Now, I think it's important that you know some facts about Puerto Rico. Number 1, 30 years after the US occupation began, during the 1930s, most Puerto Ricans worked all day in tropical heat at plantations. Number 2, working conditions were so bad that Puerto Rican workers did not have access to bathrooms. Plantation owners expected them to defecate in place. Number 3, since most Puerto Ricans were too poor to afford shoes, the filthy working conditions ended up causing an epidemic of parasitic hookworms to break out. For those unfamiliar, parasitic hookworms infect people through the feet. To deal with this problem, the globalist Rockefeller Foundation sent American doctors to Puerto Rico. One of those doctors was a man named Cornelius Rhodes. Now, I'm going to have something electronically read to you that is incredibly disturbing. You've been warned. It's from a letter written by Cornelius Rhodes, discovered by a Puerto Rican servant. It's very graphic, incredibly racist, and I would prefer not to play this for you, but Americans need to know about it, as it's one of the most significant documents in the history of Puerto Rico.
The situation is settled in Boston. Parker and I are to run the laboratory together, and either Kenneth or McMahon to be assistant, the chief to stay on. As far as I can see, the chances of my getting a job in the next 10 years are absolutely nil. One is certainly not encouraged to make scientific advances when it is a handicap rather than an aid to advancement. I can get a damn fine job here and am tempted to take it. It would be ideal except for the Puerto Ricans. They are beyond doubt the dirtiest, laziest, most degenerate and thievish race of men ever inhabiting this sphere. It makes you sick to inhabit the same island with them. They are even lower than Italians. What the island needs is not public health work but a tidal wave or something to totally exterminate the population. It might then be livable. I have done my best to further the process of extermination by killing off 8 and transplanting cancer into several more. The latter has not resulted in any fatalities so far. The matter of consideration for the patient's welfare plays no role here. In fact, all physicians take delight in the abuse and torture of the unfortunate subjects.
So what happened? Well, number 1, Cornelius Rhodes fled to the United States after this letter was discovered. He was never prosecuted or jailed, despite admitting in the letter to intentionally putting cancer in 8 patients he treated in Puerto Rico. Number 2, Puerto Rico did an investigation that supposedly cleared Cornelius Rhodes of any wrongdoing. There really is no good reason to have any faith whatsoever in this investigation at all. Puerto Rico at that time didn't have a democratic government. It was run by some general appointed in the continental United States. If it had come out that Cornelius Rhodes was infecting Puerto Ricans with cancer, it would turn the entire island nation into a powder keg of nationalism. Number 3, Cornelius Rhodes, now back in the United States, was hired by the US military to help develop chemical mustard gas weapons. Number 4, Cornelius Rhodes proceeded to then test mustard gas on a bunch of different racial groups to see what would happen. This included blacks, whites, Japanese, and of course, Puerto Ricans. Number 5, many of the soldiers who participated in these tests died of cancer. Number 6, as a result of these experiments, Cornelius Rhodes discovered that chemotherapy could be used to treat cancer. He then became incredibly wealthy and well respected despite having murdered so many people. Why is none of this taught in American history? We learn about slavery, Jim Crow, the internment of the Japanese Americans. Why don't they teach us about this? Is it because it goes against a certain narrative? A narrative that people like Ben Shapiro and Vaush desperately want to maintain? Let's talk about another part of history that almost never gets brought up: the Philippines. Number 1, the Philippines is a tropical country taken as a U.S. colony after the Spanish-American War. Number 2, due to its tropical climate, it has wet, hot summers. Number 3, William Taft, before becoming president, was governor of the Philippines. This effectively was like being dictator of the Philippines, and we know this because number 4, to avoid being hot in the summer, William Taft used Filipino taxes to build a second capital city on top of a mountain. Number 5, this included a lavish country club and golf course which had a separate entrance for whites only. Number 6, the U.S. territorial government of the Philippines allowed slavery to take place in the colony. This is despite the fact that Abraham Lincoln made clear in the Emancipation Proclamation that slavery would no longer be permitted in America. Number 7, the U.S. invested almost nothing into the defense of the Philippines, allowing it to easily be taken over by Imperial Japan during World War II. Number 8, Filipinos thought Japan would liberate them, but instead they looted the country. And number 9, the Japanese enslaved and raped many of the Filipino women during this occupation. Now, some other things to keep in mind. Number 10, during World War II, there were more Filipinos living in the United States than black people, yet most Americans weren't even aware of this. Number 11, when U.S. soldiers liberated the Philippines, many reportedly were shocked that Filipinos could speak fluent English, even though the Philippines had been part of the U.S. for half a century. But after World War II, the U.S. ended its empire, right? It's not like we put military bases all over the world that we then used to conduct military actions and covert ops from, right? We didn't do that. Well, time for some more facts. Number 1, in the 1950s, America replaced a democratically elected prime minister with a dictator in Iran. Number 2, America fought an entirely unnecessary war in Vietnam. Number 3, America gave weapons training and money to Osama bin Laden during the Soviet-Afghanistan War. Number 4, after winning the Cold War, American globalists looted the nation of Russia, destroyed its economy, and in response, Russians allowed Vladimir Putin to take over the country, which he then turned into a petrostate. Number 5, we continue to fight forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the 2 longest wars in U.S. history. America's empire today still bombs people, funds terrorist groups, spies on American citizens, and engages in propaganda. It does this to maintain its globalist international order. But you would never know this listening to people like Vaush, Destiny, or Ben Shapiro. They love our global empire and the intelligence community that polices it.
And draft it, you know, we should draft the war to itself. But when it comes to Iran, we haven't even completely secured the regions we have invaded, right? So if we then destabilize them, which will also probably destabilize the Yemeni conflict because of the supplies they give to the Houthis. I know they at least give them oil. I can't confirm anything else.
I'm not familiar with this conflict. Could I get an ELI 5? So do you believe then that the that Rojava, possibly with the assistance of Assad, will be able to hold off Turkish aggression long enough for America to get its shit together and maybe send allies back? It's extraordinary to me. It really is, because I used to think, like a little while ago, maybe like early left, like when I was early leftist, but like before Trump really like hit his stride, I used to think like, yes, you know, all governments are run by humans, sure, but the American empire has always been expertly capable of leveraging its power to ensure the maximum possible benefit from this isn't just like evil, which it is. It's also incompetent. Like nobody benefits from this. We don't even benefit from Turkish strength in the region. Like there's no Nothing.
There's no benefit. Nobody gets benefit from this except for the Turks. No one knows. It's literally just Trump either being a coward or just trying to help us poll numbers by pulling out.
He makes it sound like America is intentionally shooting down civilian planes, which America does not do. Now, Iran charged us in '88 with such negligence that it bordered on you meant to shoot down an Iranian passenger aircraft, which is okay. If you want to play that route, you can. But this idea that America goes around shooting down civilian planes is ridiculous. So the intelligence community has unanimously come to a conclusion on something that they consider to be absolute fact. And now you're moving past that, and you're like, well, hold on, like, does this really make sense here? You're not actually, like, so we're moving past that, and now you're trying to say that, like, well, I don't know if this really makes much sense. Like, I don't know if this, like, line of reasoning is, like, really legitimate. Like, regardless of whether or not you think Trump or Russia made, like, an accurate assessment or not, like, I'm curious why you think all of our intelligence agencies came together to make a statement that was apparently just wrong, in your opinion. How did this happen?
Now, how does all of this get solved? In the end, the truth is the only thing that's going to solve the Iranian problem is going to be a regime change. That regime change does not necessarily have to be pushed by the outside. It doesn't have to be a situation where the United States comes in and topples the Iranian mullahs, right? We don't have to go to war with Iran in order to effectuate this. There are groups within Iran that we ought to be fostering. And beyond that, I'm sure that we could probably find a general inside the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who would be willing to overthrow the Shahs, overthrow the mullahs, rather. And that's probably what's going to happen here, because realistically speaking, the Iranian military was purged of all of its moderates years and years and years ago. And if there were to be some sort of uprising, the Iranian military would just, as the tool of the mullahs, start shooting people in the streets. So what you really need is an interior military coup by someone who figures that the mullahs are going to get us all killed, and we need to get rid of those mullahs, and we need to install a puppet dictatorship, basically.
But that's about all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed this and you aren't subscribed to my channel, please do so.